A nuclear reactor exploded, and the world learned the true cost of human error. This is the untold story of the worst nuclear accident in history. This is Chernobyl. On April 1986, the worst nuclear disaster in history unfolded near the small Ukrainian town of Pripyat. This is what happened. But first, let's go back to the beginning. It is the 1980s, and the Soviet Union is in the middle of a Cold War arms race against the West. To keep up, they must outproduce America in every field, from military technology to consumer goods. And at the center of this competition is the Soviet nuclear program. In order to meet their quotas, the Soviet government pushes nuclear research and reactor production to its limits. Safety testing is put on the back burner, and shortcuts become more common. But it isn't all bad news. As the program expands, new cities are built for the thousands of scientists and engineers working on the projects. One of these towns is called Pripyat. Life here seems idyllic. There are parks and supermarkets, schools and swimming pools, playgrounds and public transport. Everything that any normal community would have. Families eat dinner at their kitchen tables, watch TV, and send their kids off to school. They're blissfully unaware of the monster that's lying in wait just a few hundred meters away. Then, on April 1986, everything changes. We're now inside reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl power plant. It's late at night, and a routine safety test is being conducted by 2 senior operators, Anatoly Dyatlov and Viktor Brakhanov. Their shift supervisor, Alexander Akolov, stands by ready to call an end to the experiment at the first sign of trouble. But tonight things don't go according to plan. The reactor begins to overheat. Alarms start sounding, but the system automatically shuts down before anyone can react. Now, trapped inside a crumbling building, the operators struggle to stabilize the situation. But after days of safety testing, the reactor is unstable, and no one knows what's going to happen next. Then suddenly the control rods that were supposed to be absorbing neutrons begin to fall. A chain reaction occurs, and the reactor explodes. Outside, a giant fireball shoots hundreds of meters into the air. The roof of reactor 4 collapses. Firefighters rush to the scene, but it's too late. The building is on fire, and smoke is pouring from its broken roof. Wearing nothing but their regular uniforms, the first responders run towards the blaze, desperately trying to contain the flames. But they have no idea that they're re-fighting a radioactive fire, or that they're being bombarded by invisible radiation. In the distance, locals stop to stare at the strange glow in the sky. Some take photos while others run to find shelter. That morning, thousands of citizens return home from work to find their city in chaos. Flames rise above the skyline, and a thick cloud of smoke hangs over Pripyat. Despite the danger, some residents help firefighters battle the blaze. Others stand around in shock, watching the strange glow in the sky. Parents tuck their children into bed and sing them lullabies, completely unaware that they might never see their morning light. Meanwhile, as word of the disaster reaches Soviet officials, they scramble to figure out what happened. After much debate, it is decided that the incident was caused by a faulty steam turbine, and that the fire has already been brought under control. Later that day, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev receives a phone call from his advisor. He learns the horrible truth. Reactor 4 exploded. Large parts of the city are contaminated, and people have been exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. By now, many of the firefighters and civilians who helped battle the blaze are sick and dying. Radiation is pouring into the atmosphere, and deadly clouds are sweeping across Europe. To this day, we don't know exactly how many people died from acute radiation sickness, but we do know that all the firefighters and most of the first responders were killed within weeks of the incident. The next day, the city is evacuated. Thousands of terrified citizens leave their homes carrying only the belongings they can carry. They board buses and head away from the city, forever abandoning the lives they once had. Over the next few weeks, more than 100,000 people are evacuated from the surrounding area. Meanwhile, radiation continues to leak from the damaged reactor, and contaminate the surrounding landscape. To make matters worse, because the Soviet government had covered up the truth of the disaster, other countries are caught off guard when they start detecting radioactive particles in their skies. On May 6th, 3 weeks after the initial explosion, Sweden detects high levels of radiation near Stockholm. Soon after, the rest of the world follows suit. People are shocked and confused as they try to understand what's happening. Could the Soviets be nuked? Had a nuclear war started? Was there a second reactor? No one knew the truth. As the world scrambles for answers, the Soviet government does their best to cover up the truth. They tell the Swedes that there's been a lab accident. But behind closed doors, they know this is far from the truth. Days turn into weeks, and still, the Soviet government refuses to admit the truth. Citizens across the country wonder if they'll ever get answers. Parents worry about their children and the radiation they've been exposed to. Experts are flown in from across the world to help contain the situation. But despite their best efforts, radiation continues to pour from the damaged reactor. On May 15th, the Soviet government finally admits that there's been an accident. The next day, they come clean. On May, the world learns the truth. Reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl power station exploded, causing the worst nuclear accident in history. Over the next few weeks, the world watches in horror as the Soviet Union tries to contain the disaster. Countries across Europe increase security and close their borders. Still, the winds push radioactive clouds across the continent. By June, radiation has reached almost every country on Earth. Then on June, it happens again. A second explosion rocks reactor number 4. This time, the blast is even bigger and more powerful. Once again, radiation pours into the atmosphere. For a moment, it seems like the whole world could be at risk. But thankfully, the radiation is contained. Now that the world knows the truth, they demand answers. World leaders hold emergency summits and issue statements calling for the Soviet government to come clean. The U.S. warns of serious consequences if the truth isn't revealed. Finally, the Soviets comply. On June, the world learns the full extent of the disaster. Reactor number 4 exploded, killing at least 31 people. Thousands more have been exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. Whole towns are stuck in a radioactive wasteland. Radiation is now present in countries across Europe. With the cat out of the bag, the Soviet government works around the clock to come up with a solution. Workers are brought in from across the country to help contain the blaze. But even as they work tirelessly, they're being exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. That summer, the world waits anxiously for updates. Will the Soviets be able to contain the radiation? How long will it take? What if the fire starts again? Everyone wants answers. But in the end, the fire is contained and the world slowly returns to normal. Still, the damage has been done. Thousands of people are dead and entire towns are radioactive wastelands. The Soviet government is forced to create the Chernobyl exclusion zone, a 1,000 square mile zone around the power plant that no one can enter. Within months, the site is sealed off and buried under concrete. And eventually nature reclaims the area. Plants and animals grow where none could before. Birds fly overhead, completely unaffected by the radiation. Meanwhile, the world struggles with the aftermath. Thousands of people develop radiation poisoning. Whole regions of land become uninhabitable, and food across Europe is contaminated. People argue over who's to blame. The Soviets insist that it was an accident. The West claims that it was the result of communist incompetence. But in the end, everyone suffers the consequences. And although the disaster was centered around the Soviet Union, the entire world feels its effects. In the years since, the world has worked hard to clean up the mess. Areas that were once irradiated are now open to the public. And although the land may never fully recover, nature has certainly made a comeback. Today, you can visit the abandoned sites, see the burned-out husk of reactor number 4, explore the eerily silent streets of Pripyat, and imagine what life was like in the city before the disaster. You can also visit the nearby towns that were evacuated and left to rot. Most look like typical ghost towns. Homes are abandoned and possessions are left behind. But some are slightly more disturbing. In one school, textbooks are strewn across the floor, and a teddy bear sits in the corner of a classroom. In another, playground equipment rusts in the middle of a soccer field. And although it's hard to believe today, there were once thriving communities here. In the years since, we've learned a lot from the disaster. We know that accidents can happen even when humans aren't at fault. We know that mistakes can happen even when safety is a top priority. And we know that sometimes there's simply nothing we can do to prevent disaster. But we also know that disasters like Chernobyl can be prevented if we listen to the right people, follow the right procedures, and take the right precautions. Chernobyl was not just a Soviet tragedy. It was a warning to the entire world.